Right, I think we can get started. So welcome to this week's webinar. We have these almost every Thursday, so sort of pretty much every second Thursday, I think, to be honest with everyone. We sometimes will have ones in between where we'll do just sort of straight up demos, but every second Thursday, we typically do sort of a topic that can include things like demos, previews, new features, and so on. And the idea is that we keep these very short. So it's 15 minutes. So it's super low commitment. We do them very frequently so that people can kind of come and go. And it allows us to just kind of like keep, for us, it allows us to keep thinking about things, keep generating content, talking to people in the industry, getting feedback, and just provides little snippets that you can then share if you do have a coworker that you think would be interested in. We record these. And then you also know there's another one coming up in 2 weeks' time. So today's topic is on piloting, how you as a large company could be piloting with tech startups. The problem that large companies often face when trying to work with startups on new technology. And then there's problems that startups have. So, for a company, it can be difficult to secure funding. You've got a long procurement process with lots of people involved, and startups have the exact same problem. It's a little more life and death for startups. They're usually raising money from investors while generating revenue from big companies, but both are sort of trying to work different processes that kind of involve each other in order to sort of secure funding. Company, it can be a little bit frustrating when you're trying to move things along and you have all these people to work through and all these processes. And so it's a slow moving process. Equally, slow moving sales cycles. Startup is trying to move things along, get feedback, get usage, generate revenue so they can then raise funding and all that sort of stuff. And that's a slow moving process that both have to deal with. For the company, there can be a bit of a lack of trust. You're working with a newish company that maybe hasn't worked with a large amount of huge clients. And so you need to sort of work out, do you trust this startup? And startups struggle similarly, especially in the newer stages. They don't have that social proof either. So they're trying to establish credibility. And the solution to both of these, as you may guess, is meeting in the middle with pilots. So a pilot allows you to do a low-cost proof of concept, allowing you to sort of try out the software, get feedback, not have to pay a lot. Maybe there's a limit, a discretionary amount you're able to spend without going through the procurement chain. So doing a pilot is a way to sort of prove out the use case before going for the full funding. You can simplify the scope to say, look, we don't have to involve every single employee in every single department and do big deployments and everything. So by simplifying the scope and the time frame, you don't have to involve as many people, which allows you to kind of speed up that process and involve less people. And this allows you to try before you buy, essentially. You get to see if the software solves the problem you're trying to solve or improves the process you're trying to improve before making a bigger commitment. So we are introducing, as anyone who's been on any of these, we usually have a framework, which typically involves me drawing little pictures. So I'm going to share my screen and show you the framework. So this is the pilot Power Up framework. Trademark that. And the way that this works is there's three major components to setting up a pilot. And all of these are equally important. So one is setting up KPIs. So for those that don't know, KPIs are key performance indicators. These are the measurements that show that the things are going the way they should. And you need to be sort of setting these up and measuring these throughout the pilot to work out, is this working or is this not? Do we want to move through to procurement or not? Is this just, this was a failed experiment? The other thing you need to map out is the process. So both the process for a pilot, but also the process for purchasing afterwards. You need to work out at what point do you involve what people, what paperwork needs to be involved, legal, IT, IS, all of those things. So mapping out that process is key. And then finally, you need to identify all the stakeholders. And that's the stakeholders who need a say during the pilot or test period, as well as those that you would involve during the procurement, because a pilot really is a sort of pretext to making a purchase. So you do want to sort of like have that in mind and be working towards that as you go. And there are things that can go wrong. So if you end up, you've got the KPIs in place and you've identified all the stakeholders that need a say in this. Let's say you only have those two. That means you are left with a lack of progress. Yeah, so you know what you're measuring, you know who needs to be informed of this, but you actually don't have a process to move things along. So you're gonna actually, like, when you launch the pilot, if you're able to, you're gonna come to a standstill because you can't progress without a process. If you have the KPIs, so you know what you're measuring and you know what you're doing, but you don't actually get the stakeholders buy-in, you're gonna end up with a lack of support. And whether that's during the pilot or afterwards when you actually want to make a purchase, leaving those stakeholders out for too long can mean that you don't get the support you need and all the effort's wasted. And then finally, if you get the process right and you get the right buy-ins, but you aren't measuring the right things, at the end of the pilot, you're not actually going to know whether it worked or not, which leaves you with a lack of data. But obviously, if you get everyone involved in the right order, you've got the measurements, the process, and the people, you end up in that sweet spot in the middle there, which gives you a perfect pilot. That is how all that works. I'm going to just switch back. And oftentimes, what we do at Shep is when we do pilots, we basically don't involve the IT department as much, because a big part of what we do is it's a browser extension that lives up here in your browser. And so what you can do to pilot is, instead of requiring IT and single sign-on, for example, to get involved and do all that heavy lifting before you've proven out that this does what you want it to do, the way we run our pilots is we actually select a group of pilot users who then download the app from the Chrome store manually and then sign in with the username and password. Obviously, that doesn't scale. You can't do that with a whole organization. It's so much easier if IT pushes it out and users sign in through single sign-on. But as a use, you sort of pick a pilot group who opt in and who are willing to do that manual work. That allows you to test it out, play around, build up your notifications, and then you can sort of say, all right, we're going to limit the scope. So for our pilot, we are most worried about leakage, for example. And so we're just going to focus on that. We're going to do a 3-month pilot where anyone who goes to Expedia, Orbitz, or whatever the case is, we're just going to measure. So our KPI is redirections. We're going to see how many times were employees shown this unused credits. Did they respond to that? So did they click that or not? Or maybe we're just going to show them a flat out, should you be here, redirect them to Concur. And you can see which of those worked, how often, what percentage of times the employees were shown that message, did they respond by going to the place they should go? And that then allows you to go in and measure and say, yeah, look, Shep works great as a redirection tool. Maybe you want to expand it to sort of do, duty of care guidance. So, someone goes to Singapore, you can then also measure and say, out of all the searches that were done, this many COVID guidance modals were displayed and employees clicked on policy this many times. So being able to sort of clearly identify the use cases and the measurements that are going to measure and see if those use cases were fulfilled are sort of the key elements to your pilot. Yeah, so as you saw, what Shep is a tool to bring your policy, whether it's sustainability, COVID guidance, approval flows, whatever the case is, we can bring that to life across the web on more than 4,000 sites at this point. And we are offering a return to travel discount, which gives a 25% discount off of the annual plan of the platform fee, if you're able to get started on a pilot or a full plan or whatever the case is by the end of the quarter. We realize that no one's going to close in that time frame, but if we can get those conversations started, we can sort of lock in those prices as well. And you can just sort of schedule a demo with me at sheptravel.com or reach out, directly. We also have a couple of ebooks we put together. One being the 5 steps, the sort of very high level elements you need to consider when returning to travel, as COVID, as people, vaccines allow people to start traveling. So it's the 5 steps you need to consider, from duty of care to approval flows and such. And then implemented guiding buying is a more specific Shep one, which actually talks about how you can use our tool to guide employees through the buying and sort of like the different elements involved in that. Thank you for your time, everyone. Let me know if you have any questions, and we'll follow up. I'm actually writing a very extensive blog post about piloting and getting into more details. We'll actually share that afterwards with the attendees and the people that registered. Thanks a lot. Bye. Have a good day.